So in this video, I want to talk about how I went from a 3.2 to a 4.0 GPA and how you can do the same. What's up guys? My name is Jahangir and I'm a second year pre-medical student at Texas A&M University. And today I just want to talk about how I went from a 3.2 to a 4.0 as a biology major myself. So this video is mostly for if you're wanting to self-study some of your science classes, because I personally had to self-study biology and chemistry, mostly since I didn't have the best professor in the world, so I wasn't really learning from my professor, and that's why I had to self-study. So this is pretty much how I self-studied biology and chemistry specifically, how I went from B to an A. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we first need to start off with the two phases that we're going to break this video down into. First one is going to be the learning phase, and the second one is going to be the studying phase. Now the learning phase is when you're actually learning the material. So if I'm studying chemistry like acids and bases, the learning phase would be me sitting down and trying to understand what the difference between an acid and a base is. Versus studying, that would be me trying to reinforce the information I learned about acids and bases, try to memorize it, and try to apply it to those multiple choice questions. So with the learning phase, we have to start with notes. Now, I personally really enjoy taking notes, and I believe note taking is a mandatory thing that I personally just had to do. So note taking can be very different from person to person, and a lot of people have different styles of note taking. Now what worked for me personally is using pen and paper, writing down a heading, and then having some bulletin points. This also really depends on what kind of resources you're given to take notes from. So for biology, I was giving my professor slides, and from past exams, I knew that he derived those multiple choice questions from those slides. Even the smallest details from the slides were an entire test question, which is worth about 2.5 points. So I knew that I have to write down as much information as possible from the slides. So I based all my notes for biology on my professor's slides, but for chemistry in this part of the semester was a little bit more conceptual and math based, so I knew I had to understand that part of chemistry. So that's why I just used a class textbook and I took notes from that. So number one thing you need to identify is where you're taking your notes from. Either if it's going to be from your professor's slides or the class textbook or even lecture videos if you have those. So once you do that, you also have to identify if you're good at taking notes digitally or the old classic pen and paper, which I've found pen and paper is much better for myself, which honestly you're just going to have to experiment for yourself. I can't really say if digital notes are going to be best for you or if pen and paper are going to be best for you, because they have their pros and cons. Like for digital, you save space, you know where all of your notes are, it's just in one place, you just have to open it. And you also save paper versus if you're doing pen and paper. The pros of that are that you minimize distractions, because if you're writing on your iPad, you also have a bunch of other applications on that iPad. So pen and paper, it's only one job, which is just writing, so minimizes distractions. And also that pen and paper feel can be very authentic for some people like myself. So I found that to work best for myself. So you're gonna have to identify the second thing, which can you take notes better digitally or pen and paper? Now, once you've identified that, you really have to understand how you take notes and what works best for you. Now, what worked best for me personally is, like I said, having those headings and bulletin points. Those bulletin points mostly for some of those fact-based stuff, like if I was talking about the animal kingdom, for example, in biology, I'd have a heading that might say something like phylum Chordata, which is one of the phylums in the animal kingdom. Then I could put bulletin points of what are the characteristics, such as a post-anal tail or just other characteristics that I obviously forgot about because finals are already over. But those bulletin points are for you to add those small facts. Now, that's more of the memorization conceptual part of taking notes. The math part is just going to be repetition. Like for chemistry, for example, just to go through the math side of like those ICE tables, I just went through the repetition of going through each of those practice problems, finding a way that helps me solve those. But more on the memorization conceptual part, you really want to write down the information that works best for you. Either it's bulletin points, either it's mind maps, whatever works for you personally, and you're going to have to find that out for yourself. So note taking is the number one thing you need to do in order to learn information. Is one of the things that I have used in order to learn any sort of information by self-studying. Now, usually when I'm confused about the topic that I'm taking notes on, I usually go to Perplexity AI to ask any questions I have, and this is where I use AI as an integration for self-studying, because I think AI is one of the greatest things that you could use in order to actually learn the material. And Perplexity AI is basically ChatGPT, but a little bit better, mainly because it cites its resources. So resources to videos, articles, just a bunch of other stuff, which is very useful if I'm confused about the explanation Perplexity gives me. I can just go to the video, or I can go to the article. Now, AI is pretty much served as my personal professor, and I usually give specific prompts to the AI so that I can understand the information better. So I'll use prompts like explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, or include a real life example or a metaphor, or just anything like that. On top of that, I use today's sponsor, Mindgrasp AI. Mindgrasp AI is an all-in-one AI study tool where you can create notes, flashcards, quizzes, and use the Q&A feature, which I've personally benefited from the most. All you have to do is drop in the slides from your professor, a link from a YouTube video, some text from a textbook, or even your lecture videos, and Mindgrasp will automatically create a personalized study session for you. How I usually use Mindgrasp is I get my professor's slides and I create that into a study session. I get an explanation for Perplexity, create that into a study session, a link from a YouTube video, and also create that into a study session, and even my professor's lecture video and put that into a study session. So I'll usually have 3 to 5 study sessions, which I've seen has worked best for me. And this is mainly where I actually study. Unlike other study AI tools, which are only good at one job, like creating multiple choice questions or creating flashcards, Mindgrasp can do it all. And you can use code Kareem20 for 20% off your first month. So to summarize the learning phase, all I pretty much did was take notes and use Perplexity AI as my tutor or professor, if you want to say. Now, getting into the study phase, this is when I used mostly Mindgrasp AI as one of the AIs that I used, as well as some other study methods. Now, to get into the studying phase, we have to talk about active recall versus spaced repetition. And it's actually very simple. Active recall is basically this idea of actively recalling the information. I mean, pretty much as the word says. And spaced repetition is basically doing this for a long time, frequently. So doing this as frequently and as consistently as possible. So I kind of think of spaced repetition as going to the gym. Going one time to the gym won't help you build muscle or get to that physique or whatever goals you want. Going to the gym one time won't get you to your health goals, but if you go to the gym consistently, maybe 3 to 4 times a week, or maybe every day if you wanted to, then you'd see results. And that's exactly what spaced repetition is. It's that if you study for maybe an hour a day, every single day, or even 20 minutes, the smallest thing, 20 minutes every single day, that will quickly add up into you performing on the exam. So some examples of active recall include flashcards, blurting, Feynman's technique, practice exams or practice problems, and just a whole bunch more, but those are the ones that we're going to be focusing on today. Those are the ones that I personally used. Now for biology and chemistry, if I had to memorize a topic, I would either blurt or go through practice problems. Now you can also use flashcards to your benefit, and if you wanted to, you could also use Anki, and I highly recommend Anki as one of the flashcard softwares that you use. But me personally, I really enjoyed just going through practice problems because that really prepared me for the real exam. Because on the real exam, I'm gonna have 4 answers to choose from and 1 big question. So I wanted to prepare myself for that specific part. It's kind of like if you wanted to get stronger in bench press, you do bench press. So that's the sort of philosophy I followed, and with blurting, I would just look at my notes and try to write down every word from memory. So I'd look at the notes for about 2 or 5 seconds, then put it down and write everything I could from memory, from straight memory, which is one of the greatest study methods in terms of our active recall sort of world. Now for the practice problems, I used the practice problems from Mindgrasp that was already created, those sort of quiz questions, and that was really helpful because it really prepared me for the actual exam. Now, Feynman's technique, just to give you guys a brief introduction to Feynman's technique, it's basically teaching it to a 5-year-old, teaching that topic to a 5-year-old. Because if you think about it, if you're trying to teach acids and bases to a 5-year-old, you're really going to dumbify it down to a level of a 5-year-old. And when you do that, you're going to be asking yourself questions of how can I relate acids to a 5-year-old? Can I relate to toys? You ask yourself all these questions, and when you actually teach it, you learn it much better. So Feynman's technique is teaching so that you learn better, and you can do this in many ways. You could actually get a study group and sort of go through Feynman's technique, teaching some of your friends, or you could pretty much do it alone and pretend as if you're a professor trying to teach this topic. Now, what I did for chemistry specifically is I created videos for my nonprofit organization Medporium, and you can actually check it out. I'll put a link in the description for all the videos that I made, but it was really helpful to just go through it and as if I was teaching someone else, just like another student. And that helped me understand chemistry much better and actually helped me get from a B to an A in chemistry. Now, to incorporate spaced repetition into the mix, I created the 5-5 rule for myself, which is doing 5 practice problems and 5 pages of blurting for biology and chemistry each. So it's a really small thing to do every single day, but if you do it consistently, it really adds up. So I did that until 5 days before the actual exam, and that's when I go through practice exams, review, and I have a whole sort of method I'll talk about in a later video on how I prepare for an exam, either 5 to 7 days out. But that's pretty much the studying phase that I used in order to study biology and chemistry specifically. So just to summarize, if you want to memorize the information, definitely use these active recall methods such as flashcards, blurting, and practice problems. For the conceptual topics, you really want to dive into Feynman's technique, because if you can teach that concept to someone and they can understand it well, you'll understand it even better. And for those math questions in like chemistry, all you have to do is just repetition. Go through as many practice problems as you can until you're pretty much a master at solving those questions. So that's the learning and study system that I've used in order to bounce back from a 3.2 to a 4.0. Now, honestly, I can't guarantee that this system will work well for you because you're gonna have to tailor it for yourself, but I highly recommend that you guys use this system as a starting point and just tweak it a little. Maybe if practice problems don't work best for you to memorize, you use flashcards. Maybe if the note-taking that I've used doesn't really work for you, then try a different way of note-taking, like Cornell notes or mind maps. You really have to tailor it for yourself because there is no one study method, study system, anything like that that is gonna be the most optimal. It really just depends on you, your time frame, your mindset, everything that you have to factor in. But like I said, try to use this as a starting point and experiment with it. See what you like, what you don't like, and make it comfortable and as easy to follow for yourself. So hopefully this video helped you guys understand how you can self-study some of those science classes like biology and chemistry. Because I know as a pre-medical student, you really care about your grades. And grades really matter as a pre-medical student. Sometimes we can't really accept a B, and that's why we really need to do well in some of these science classes. But unfortunately, we might not have the best professor. So understanding how to self-study might be the best way in order for you to succeed in these classes. So hopefully this video helped you in that way, and as always, a Pomodoro day will make you a doctor someday. I'll see you guys in the next one.